Meeting to order. For those that would like, please stand for the Lord's Prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father,
Our Lord in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
need a motion and a second for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Ms. Hurley.
Good evening, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. The first item on the agenda this evening is an update on the COVID-19, also known as the coronavirus, by our local health officer, Lori Brewster.
Well, thank you all for inviting me today to give you a briefing on the COVID-19. As you all well know, this has been in the news for quite a while, and it's keeping me very busy. So I have to preface this with this information is what was current as of March 2nd, 2020 at around 2 o'clock, because everything changes minute by minute. So there are some things that have already changed as we speak. So we began monitoring this back in December of 2019, and it was related to an outbreak that occurred within an animal market in Wuhan, China. I wasn't familiar with Wuhan, China until this outbreak occurred. I don't know if you all were or not. In January, we began having our meetings, teleconferences with the Center for Disease Control as well as the state health department to look at, what we needed to do to prepare for this outbreak. And as I said earlier, this is rapidly evolving day to day at this point. So coronaviruses are common. They generally cause respiratory issues, like with the common cold, and the symptoms with this particular virus are fever, cough, and shortness of breath, very similar to the seasonal flu virus. And since seasonal flu is running rampant across the country, we're having concerns related to that. If you remember, there have been other coronaviruses that have made people ill, and they were the MERS-CoV and SARS, and now we have the COVID-19. So this is just a new coronavirus that we're trying to manage. So the reservoir for this was believed to be animal origin. They believe it was actually the pangolin, and I had never heard of a pangolin, and actually researched it, and it's a very interesting looking animal. The picture that's up on the screen is a picture of the virus itself. And as I said earlier, the symptoms are fever, cough, and shortness of breath. Shortness of breath is one of the key issues related to this virus. And illnesses are ranging from absolutely no symptoms to severe illness and death. And we believe that there are people throughout the world that are walking around that have the virus and they don't know it because they're not becoming ill. The initial incubation period was thought to be 2 to 14 days. I believe you will see that extended because There have been individuals that have been quarantined for 14 days and then have tested positive after that 14-day period. There is no vaccine for this virus. They are working on a vaccine, and they're hoping to have it in about 3 to 6 months. And the treatment is actually just supportive treatment, making sure that people have medications for like Tylenol for pain and fever. So this is a picture of where the COVID virus has actually been found. And over the weekend, they added both Mexico and Canada to the list. So, you know, as you see, this is rapidly developing across the world. These numbers have changed as of probably about 4 o'clock yesterday, but these are the numbers that were reported. Total number of confirmed cases in the United States is 43. That does not include the individuals that were on the cruise ship or that have come in from other parts of the world into our military bases. One of the good things that has occurred today is the state of Maryland lab is now able to run the testing for COVID-19. And so they will do the initial testing in Baltimore, and then if that is positive, then it will be a confirmatory test out of the Center for Disease Control. We do not have any confirmed cases in Maryland, but we do have an additional 7 that have been sent for testing as of today. I started to put the travel restrictions up here, but it is so ever-changing. I just put the link up so that if you want to know where you can travel and where they're encouraging you not to go, the list is up there, and it's being updated with the CDC. So what is the health department doing? We are involved in a lot of conference calls, both with the Center for Disease Control and Maryland Department of Health. We are the entities that take the calls for the individuals that are ill and thinking that they may have contracted coronavirus or COVID-19. We do the preliminary investigation to rule out if there is a need for testing, and there is a matrix through the CDC that tells us which individuals we can send for testing. We are doing a lot of work with looking at the need for possible investigations related to individuals with travel history. Doing a lot of communication. Visit our website or our Facebook page, and you will see COVID-19 all over the place because we want the community to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. We're doing a lot of education with various entities, as well as participating in the weekly conference calls. Want to emphasize here that the public health threat, both here and across the U.S., remains low. And you know, I think that if we can get that message out, it may keep people from being overly excited. And we are continuing to do planning to respond in the event that there is a case in Wicomico County. So what can everyone do? Hand washing. I would love to just have that be the only thing that I put up here, because that is the main thing that you can do to prevent spread of illness. And I met with leaders in the county today and gave out hand washing forms to put all over the community.
Instructions.
I hope I don't have to do instructions, but I did. I said you have to wash them with, wash your hands with hot water and soap for 20 seconds. So avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. I was in a meeting yesterday and just realized how many times I did do that. And I don't know that anybody really thinks about it until you're being told you shouldn't. And then the next bullet down, if you're sick, stay home. One of the things that I asked of the leaders today was relax your sick leave policies so that people don't feel like they have to report to work, or don't tell them, I understand you're sick, but come in anyway. And finally, if you are sick and develop a fever, cough, seek medical care. The other thing that I'm encouraging people to do is to build a kit, preparedness kit, very similar to what we're doing when we have a hurricane, so that you have a supply of things on hand, and there is a listing on the Maryland Department of Health website, and the link is up there. But some of the things that we're encouraging is pain relievers, fever reducers like Tylenol, decongestants, cough drops, but also the alcohol-based hand sanitizer and non-perishable food. Because the last thing you want to do is to be ill and have to go to the grocery store. That's the last thing I want you to do. So there's no vaccine at this point. As I said earlier, they're hoping to have a vaccine in 3 to 6 months. And there are additional resources out there. David Shipley and I are pulling together in the group of agencies to do a briefing with them and look at what are their anticipated needs in the event that we have a COVID case in Maryland, and then if we have a COVID case in Wicomico County. So that's where we're at now. As you all have heard, there have been at least 6 deaths in the United States, all out in Washington. And there may have been more since I've been at work today. I just haven't had the opportunity to look at the news. So I will answer any questions you have, if you have any.
So if there was a case that came up in Wicomico County with an individual, what would be your plan? I mean, would you isolate that person?
Absolutely.
Where, how?
Generally, what we would encourage is isolation in the home, in their own home. But if they're sick enough, they would likely be in the hospital in an isolation room.
Mark, quick
Josh?
question. Is there any expectation this will follow any kind of seasonality like the flu virus? We have a flu season. Is there any expectation this will run a similar type of window of time?
We can only hope. Their seasonal flu, yes, we have seasonal flu times. However, you can get the flu any time of the year. That's one of the concerns. But if you look at what's happening in China right now, they're having a decline of new cases. So that's speaking a little bit of hope in my eyes.
Thanks.
Josh?
I would say this afternoon I found the COVID-19 tracker app. I don't know if you've seen that online, but it's a great resource for anyone who's looking at it. It's a really well done app that puts all of the World Health Organization confirmed cases as well as suspected cases and who's in remission and not. And it's a pretty amazing piece, and you can actually, I don't know if it's accurate, but apparently there's one person who self-reported that is in Berlin at the moment, and then there's a couple cases in Delaware potentially that could be.
Yeah, we have had people tested or asked for testing in Wicomico County, but they didn't meet the definition, and they actually were testing positive for seasonal flu. And the cases in Delaware, to my knowledge, came back negative.
I would also, I don't know if we know this yet, but what coordination is there between our local government and our hospitals? I guess I'm assuming a lot, but do we know if they are ready, or do we know if our local hospitals are ready for an outbreak, God forbid, that actually does occur?
I believe Peninsula Regional is well prepared because they were an assessment hospital for the Ebola virus. They also, when they are looking at the potential for a COVID-19 case, they must contact the health department. So we would be working in concert with them if there was a potential case.
Last thing I'll say is the painter's masks don't work, right?
Correct.
Despite the fact that I went to Home Depot this weekend and there was no masks anywhere to be found, including the cheap painter's masks. It was completely sold out.
Yes, I would encourage people not to go get masks. You don't need masks at this point. What we're seeing is a run on these masks, that the N95s that actually do protect individuals, and we need those masks in the event that we have individuals that need to be protected.
John, do you have a question? I was thinking, why so many outbreaks in Washington State and nothing on the East Coast?
I wish I could answer that. I really can't, and I don't know that anyone can at this point.
All right. Any more questions? Well, thank you, Ms. Brewster.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms.
The
Hurley.
next item on the agenda this evening is Resolution Number 11-2020, making a supplemental appropriation from contingency to gypsy moth control in the amount of $1,050 for the spraying of 29 acres for gypsy moths. The Maryland Department of Agriculture identified 29 acres on the west side of Johnson Road where gypsy moth population may cause defoliation and recommended spraying the area. The county's cost share is $35 per acre with a federal grant for the gypsy moth spraying. And we do have Mr. Weston Young here, Assistant Director of Administration.
Okay, I need a motion to approve Resolution Number 11-2020.
So moved.
Got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We got discussion here.
A discussion? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Cannon?
Yeah, I have a question. Weston.
Sure.
It was for 1,050. We're not talking a lot of money here, but I was confused because in the materials that you gave us, the check for 1,050 appeared to already have been written in December.
That wasn't a check to my knowledge. That may have been a purchase order.
It's a
So,
copy of the check.
well,
I'll show it to you if you
yeah,
want to see it.
I don't know if I've seen it.
That's okay.
I understand it. Sure, sure. So yeah, I don't know if this went through. This could have been processed because so the background of this is we have. So this is a program that we participate annually with. We typically budget $3,000, and my guess is if this $1,050 was put towards that, the impression was that it was part of that program. The $3,000 goes towards monitoring in the county for the invasive European gypsy moth, which happens to be one of the most, I'll say, destructive pests for hardwoods on the East Coast. This 1,050 is, as Laura mentioned in the description, they've identified major infestation in approximately 29 acres of non-state-owned property, and they would like aerial suppression. Again, this, my guess is it's something that we said we were interested in, given the threat and given that it's part of federal money, and then it was realized that we did not budget for it.
I'd entertain a motion to table this if we could. Again, it's one of the pieces of, it's one of the resolutions that's come before us in the past where it's stating that the Director of Finance has certified that the appropriation to be transferred does not encumber the county, et cetera. And we don't have a finance director, so I'm making a motion to table this.
Got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
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 You got, Ernie, well, I didn't hear you.
I said aye.
You got 4 ayes and
Three opposed.
3 nays.
All right, yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Dodd,
Next is
could I make
resolution-
brief comment too on this and the coming resolution. What the charter actually says is that the finance director shall certify in writing. And not only is there no finance director, but there's no certification in writing.
That's great.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Ms. Hurley?
The next item for business is Resolution Number 12-2020, making a supplemental appropriation from contingency to general services in the amount of $72,000 for engineering services in connection with the design and replacement of the mechanical system in the old courthouse. Temperatures in the old courthouse have been extremely warm, and due to steam leaks, it is determined that the HVA system in the building requires significant upgrades. And we have Mr. Pete Matthews here, General Services Supervisor.
Does everybody have the information I provided in your packet?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This all started not long after I took the position with a complaint of a wet floor on the ground floor of the old courthouse.
Need a motion.
Yeah, we need a motion, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Need a motion to approve resolution, you jumped ahead of me. Need a motion to approve resolution 12-2020.
So moved.
You got a motion to have a second?
Is this motion to introduce it, or? I'll second.
You got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Entertain a motion to table.
Got a motion to table. Do you have a second?
Second.
Got a motion to table and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
Point of order, don't we have to vote on the first motion to introduce? Do we?
That's what you said, you seconded that.
Yeah, don't we have to then go and?
The motion to table actually carries with the original motion.
I know what you're saying. No, there wasn't a
Think it's right.
vote to introduce it.
Yeah.
You're right. But
Okay.
in getting ahead of ourselves.
Can we do a little better explanation of why we're tabling this? I think
He would need to withdraw his motion, because once you make the motion to table, there's no
Can't discuss
discussion.
All right.
You want to withdraw it? I'll withdraw your second. I'll withdraw it.
I'll withdraw my second until we
Withdraw
have
the
a further
table.
explanation.
Okay.
Well, I think it's rather clear. We've had this in prior council meetings where we recognize that we don't have a finance director in Wicomico County. And that being said, by charter, we're required, as is stated in the resolution, it says that the finance director must provide information and proof, and Mr. Taylor says in writing, that the funds are unencumbered and that we can make the transfer, we can make the expense. So we are at somewhat of a deadlock in Wicomico County. We recognize that, but it is the law in Wicomico County that the finance director has to do this. So as long as we're in a situation where we don't have a finance director, many things are going to come to a standstill. It's terribly unfortunate, but it really is the law. And I think as a council, we have to recognize that so that we're not culpable as well.
That's
Yeah.
fine. I just wanted to, make it more clear to the audience and the folks that's watching TV why we are in this situation. And to vote to do this is basically violating the charter,
Right,
as the charter is being violated now, but not having a finance director,
right.
an approved finance director. So, anyway.
Yeah, and I'll actually disagree with that. I don't think at all we're violating the charter by doing simply routine county business. These internal transfers are about as routine as you can get, and, we're all fully aware of the situation with the finance director, and this needs to get resolved. But in the meantime, we just can't continue to hold the county at bay and not be able to do county business, and it's definitely not fair to be putting county employees in the middle of this. Mr. Young and Mr. Matthews come here, taking their time and just presenting very routine procedures, and then not moving forward to keep the county operating. I mean, some of these things are very time sensitive, and they need to be done.
Well, you make a good point, Bill, except for the fact that we're not the ones holding anything up.
Oh, I'm perfectly aware. I mean,
We're simply trying to abide by the law.
Right, we're all aware
as
of the
is-
situation, but
Yeah.
I feel tabling these things and not doing anything just simply makes a bad situation even worse.
Well, it does make a bad situation worse, Bill. I agree with you there, but the situation is we're supposed to follow the law. And approving this would be basically breaking the charter. And that's, you know, that's not something that we should, as a
Right.
council, be doing.
But I think that's debatable.
I think that's up for interpretation.
To be clear, these are very important issues, obviously, from the amount of repairs that need to happen in the old courthouse. I continue to hear more and more of how much of a poor situation the building is in, and it's going to continue to increase. And even just like the previous issue on the agenda, you know, my family's impacted on our farm when gypsy moths came through and knocked out half our crops. So these are very important issues, and we need to come to a resolution sooner than later.
And that's really the purpose for tabling this, and it's the purpose for why we tabled a resolution, I believe it was about a month ago. And that's because we do need to send a message. I think it's important to send a message to the executive branch that this does need to be done sooner than later, because it's going to be a very short time, and it's not far away, where we're going to have to make very serious decisions on the capital improvement plan, and we're going to have to make very serious decisions on a budget, $150 million budget. And we don't have a finance director, and I think it's irresponsible, and it's up to this council to at least try to uphold our end.
Right, we tabled that a month ago and nothing changed.
I understand. I'm not, believe me, I'm the last one to defend the executive branch, but I would defend the law as it is. Motion to table, if I could.
Got a motion to table? Do you have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed?
Who all opposed?
4, 3.
3 opposed and 4 ayes. All right, moving on.
The next
you,
item for your consideration is
you, Pete.
Resolution Number 13-2020, extending an audit contract by and between Wicomico County, Maryland, and PKS and Company, PA, for fiscal years 2020 through 2022, I believe.
All right, need a
Pursuant-
motion, are you done?
Pursuant to the Wicomico County Charter, Section 904, the county is required annually to have a completed independent audit of all financial transactions, books, and records of the county and its officials and employees receiving and dispersing public funds of the county or handled by the county for other agencies. The county council is to engage the auditing firm, and the process is exempt from the competitive bidding.
Okay, I need a motion to approve Resolution 13-2020.
So moved.
Got a motion, have a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Was there an RFP for this?
A request for proposal. This is actually the county council's responsibility to select the auditing firm, and we have not done an RFP.
Okay. I would just request that we do an RFP to get the best pricing and what's available there.
Any further discussion?
In the past, have we done RFPs?
It has been considered, but to my knowledge, one has not been done.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
What do we,
What are you voting on? We got a request on the table for,
I didn't hear you.
we have a request on the table. Nicole was, Councilman
There was no
Ackland was
further
talking about it. Excuse me?
There was no further discussion.
She asked a question, not request.
I thought it was answered.
Yes.
Okay.
so
And I said I made the request to,
are you making a motion?
yes, a
do an
motion to an
RFP?
RFP. Yes.
All right,
Thanks,
we
Jim.
have a motion for an RFP. Do we have a second?
To be clear, is that a motion for contingent upon this approval, or is that a motion for future RFPs?
I think she wants to table it
I
so
think it's-
a
this
motion,
is-
so the RFP can be considered. Do you want to
So-
reword
Correct.
your motion?
So do you want a motion to table it?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I hear you say it?
Oh, can I have a motion to table it?
Do I have a second to table it?
I'll second.
I got a motion and a second. All in favor to table?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
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 I'm opposed.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Is that 3 opposed,
Four
It's
four
four.
opposed.
4 opposed?
Yes,
So the motion to table then would fail?
that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
He was sweating.
In discussion,
He was sweating.
since we're still in discussion, I appreciate what Councilwoman Ackley is asking, because, you know, we are trying to see that we can get the best services for Wicomico County, and it's no reflection on PKS whatsoever. They've done a fantastic job, and they're an excellent accounting firm. But I do recognize the fact that Councilwoman Ackley is trying to do her due diligence and thinks that the council should do that. My concern is that this is a very late order to have this discussion.
Yeah.
This is something that I think it should have been discussed maybe a month ago or 2 months ago, where we'd have time to do that. Last second, when we have representatives from PKS at the table, I just think that it needs to be more clearly thought out later.
And we can certainly bring this up again next year.
Well, it's a three-year agreement.
It's a three-year RFP, or
3-year.
proposal.
It is a three-year agreement.
Okay?
Mike, just a real quick question. At some point, just as good auditing practices, you all might even recommend this yourself, but at some point, do you get another firm to do it, only to get
Well-
an outside?
Well, I tried to
opinion?
outline the reasons why you may not want to do that in the letter that I submitted to you today.
Or do you do that more internally yourselves,
Yes,
getting
but
different
also
people?
we try to rotate staff on
Right.
jobs. We'll generally keep the senior managers and partners on the job just because of the complexities of the county, but we do rotate staff quite frequently. as
So
far as the
you're
staff
achieving that
accounts.
objectivity
Right.
internally? Yeah.
That's correct.
Yep, thank you.
You do an excellent job, by the way.
Thank you.
I think they've been doing a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the charter obviously doesn't require it to be bid, but that's just, and that's well known.
Right.
That's not the point I know that what you're talking about today. But, anyhow.
Okay.
So anyhow, we got the 3-year proposal in there, or the request for extension. And just as a point of reference, the prior audit fee was $116,400, and I think I gave you a 3-year proposal for 2021 and 22.
Mhm.
Any questions on that at this point, or I guess
Have
you're
you
gonna
already
take?
started on this year?
No, absolutely not.
I know there's been some discussion.
Yeah, well, we frequently get questions throughout the year, which we address issues, but nothing related to the current year audit.
Okay.
So,
Anything else?
okay. All done with it?
All right,
Thank
thank
You
you.
still have
Thank
your
you.
motion.
We have to vote.
Yeah, you still have your original motion on the table?
We all voted on it?
No, you voted on the table.
On the table, okay. All right. Do we have to start off with a motion again? Because we had an original
No,
motion.
you have a first and a
Okay.
second. Yeah.
All right, let's vote on resolution number 13, 2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
One opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Michael.
Appreciate it.
Mr. President, that's all I have.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have Mr. Bob Taylor.
Yeah, we have, for introduction tonight, legislative bill 2020-01, which is an act to amend the Wicomico County classification and pay plan by adding positions in the state's attorney's office. And I see we have the state's attorney here tonight, Jamie Dykes, and Billy McDermott.
Mr. Taylor, if you
Deputy.
can speak into the microphone for us.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Want me to start from the beginning, or just, I'll start from the beginning. We have legislative bill number 20-01, an act to amend the Wicomico County classification and pay plan by adding positions in the state's attorney's office. And we have with us tonight the state's attorney, Jamie Dykes, and the deputy state's attorney, Billy McDermott.
You all can come to the table, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Introduce yourselves, please.
Certainly. Jamie Dykes, State's Attorney, Deputy State's Attorney Billy McDermott. Thank
Welcome.
you all for meeting us 2 weeks ago and again tonight. I'd love to start with an update about kind of where we are in the whole investigative process. I can share things with you now that I was not able to earlier.
Okay.
You can speak into the mic.
Certainly.
Yep.
Thank you.
We first received a call from Chief Duncan on Thursday, February 6th. We also requested a briefing the next day. The Deputy State's Attorney, Investigator Mike Doherty, and myself were at Salisbury Police Department for more than 5 hours on Friday, receiving information about issues with the property room. We made requests of our staff. After that, concerns about the property room. Those requests revealed a few concerns. One of those concerns was outlined in a full two-page memo by a prosecutor. That memo was written in July of 2012. Regrettably, that memo contains information that we were under a duty to disclose since December of 2011. That is devastating for pending criminal cases and for closed criminal cases that have been charged and prosecuted since December of 2011. Having received that information, been able to digest it on Valentine's Day, the Deputy State's Attorney and I were at the office until 9 o'clock, trying to figure out what it is, given the nature of the information. We agreed to take a break, and we didn't work on Saturday. We reconvened on Sunday. What was apparent after we spent the hours mapping the issues out on Sunday was that we needed to call the U.S. Attorney, Rob Herr. We did so. Rob answered the phone, agreed to meet us the next day. He met, which was a federal holiday. He and 3 of his prosecutors met with us. We drove to Baltimore. We met with him for more than 2 hours and his team. As a result of that meeting, there were multiple agents down on Wednesday, the 19th, within hours of our meeting on Monday afternoon. I was not, would not have been wise to share that with you at our last meeting. Number one, it's an investigation that's pending, and time and timing is everything. And we do not discuss those things.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Certainly. Sorry. Thank you, Laura. And Rob Herr specifically requested that we not mention anything regarding our meeting at that time. We are in a different posture now. We come to you knowing that we have these 2 concerns. We have the property issue concerns that date back to 1997. While we will have hearings in many, many cases regarding those, we are hopeful that we survive, that our convictions survive those motions. We have no reason to believe at this point in time that those convictions will be disturbed. What is far more devastating and concerning, and will have a tremendous impact on our caseloads, are the witness issues that are identified in the memo that was penned in July of 2019. Every one of my prosecutors is deemed to know what was in that memo, though none of them did. They are deemed to have known it and deemed to have disclosed it, meaning providing it to all defendants in which those 3 officers were to be witnesses. At this point in time, I have 15 active circuit court prosecutors. Their caseloads at this point in time, pulled from numbers today, are 852 between the 15 of them. For comparison, we have provided disclosures. So far, more will come. We have provided disclosures in 633 cases regarding our witness issues, and another 223 regarding property room issues. And that is only our circuit court. That does not include our district court, where approximately 30,000 cases, is that right, Mr. McGovern?
That's correct.
We are, to the extent that anyone believes that this will not impact our caseload, they are mistaken. The Office of the Public Defender issued a statement. A senior assistant public defender is present here tonight. That statement indicated, evidence integrity is a fundamental component of a fair trial. While the details on the extent of the issue are still forthcoming, this could impact hundreds or thousands of current and former clients. We are examining current cases to determine which may be impacted and warrant dismissal, and are committed to ensuring that former clients whose cases may have been compromised, may have had compromised evidence at any stage, are able to clear their names. The fundamental right to a fair trial is that upon which our system is based. That's what makes this country the best country in the world. This information, none of us know at this point in time the number of cases that this will impact, but I assure you that it will be unlike anything any state's attorney's office in this state has suffered. Mr. McDermott.
I think the state's attorney has adequately conveyed the severity and scope of what we're talking about, but I just want to break it down a little bit more into the compartments so that we all kind of have an understanding of what we're dealing with. And I want to kind of start in reverse from where she just read the
Mr. McDermott.
Can you not?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so hard to look at everybody. Okay.
We're right up to you.
Mr. McDermott, before you went, what's your role in this?
Sure. So I'm
Yeah.
the Deputy State's Attorney for Wicomico
Right.
County. If you're asking what my role has been in this process, I think it's fair to say that myself and Ms. Dykes, we work together as a team on these issues for, I think, ensuring that both accuracy and efficiency in the process. It's better to have two legal minds than one legal mind, I think, in any situation, and so we rely on each other to move forward.
We are in uncharted territory. I mean, there's no case law charting out exactly how this is supposed to work. I mean,
What I wanted to start with was the release from the Office of the Public Defender, because while we're here, I mean, we can talk to you, and I think it's important that we speak to the government and certainly to the people that are here about the issues that we're facing, but we are here for a very specific reason. We're here for resources. And so I think if we're talking to you right now in respect of the resource request, I think it's important to kind of give you an idea of the scope and the measures by which we calculated our request.
So before you go further, can
Please.
we make a motion to introduce legislative bill 2020-01? Need a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion, do we have a second? Okay, any discussion?
Requires a vote. Requires a vote.
At the end, after discussion.
Yeah, it's gonna be a roll call vote.
Well, it requires a vote to discuss it. Entertain a motion, second. All those in favor, discuss.
Want him to continue?
I think you need a vote. You got a motion, second, you need to vote, and then we discuss it. Yes.
No, well, we can vote.
You're not voting on it yet, but you're just voting on,
I think
you're
we're
voting on the introduction.
Okay, introducing this legislation.
Yeah.
So starting with you, Mr.
Not to
Cannon.
pass it. It doesn't require a roll call, just,
Well, I guess I got some questions, yeah, I mean,
no, we're not voting on it.
I understand.
We just gotta
Vote on
introduce it.
We gotta
introducing it.
introduce it. We gotta
Right.
get it on the table.
Then we can discuss.
It requires
Yeah,
a-
but just one question regarding the introduction.
Yeah.
I mean, just because we don't get too far down this path, because I mean, I understand the severity of your situation totally. But I also just sat here and witnessed the majority of this council twice table something because they said, they couldn't transfer dollars because of the finance director. Now, how is this going to be done? You're talking about, following the charter and so forth. So how are you going to be able to do this if you don't have a finance director? Who's going to pay for
We're
who's
just
going to
introdu-
sign off on this?
We're just doing an introduction for discussion. That's all we're doing right now.
Right, but I'm just
When
making
we
that
come to,
point.
when we come to vote on the bill, there's no requirement for funding, so it doesn't involve the finance director. This is just establishing the positions. Doesn't require,
Funding?
it doesn't require what you're concerned about, Bill. That's not an issue.
Got a motion and a second to introduce this legislative bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, any discussion?
I think, yeah.
Please continue.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Vice President. So just to give an idea of the scope, and I go back to the release from the Office of the Public Defender, where they say hundreds, if not thousands. That was when we were only dealing with the property room issue. And I think that's important to note right now, because the property room issue, we addressed this council before. We kind of gave you an idea, not kind of, we did give you an idea of the scope of the problem we're dealing with there. There are approximately 82,000 pieces of evidence over at the Salisbury Police Department. We initially thought it was going to be 40 to 45, and we were horrified by that number. It's doubled. And so that issue has only gotten 100% worse than the last time we were in front of you. I think Ms. Dykes is correct when she says that we expect to be successful on those motions, but from a resource allocation request perspective, simply because we're going to be successful on the motion does not mean that we don't have to allocate resources to be successful. What's going to happen is there are defense attorneys in the room right now. They are going to file motions, and they're going to file motions to open cases that are both active and old for the examination of certain pieces of evidence. We're going to have to dedicate prosecutors to respond in writing to those motions, to appear for the hearings, and to appear for any subsequent decisions that might be necessary. So even though we believe we'll be successful, that doesn't necessarily detract from the fact that we're going to have to allocate resources to it. But that's just the first problem. The much more concerning problem, of which Ms. Dykes just alluded to, was in not researching, but in preparing to deal with this issue, we went to our staff, and our staff produced, or at least one of our prosecutors produced, a memo. And while I don't think that we necessarily need to get into the details of the memo right now, I can tell you that the memo alleges generally that 3 police officers purposely concealed what is known as exculpatory evidence, which means if there's a piece of evidence that could go toward your innocence. There were 3 police officers in the city of Salisbury who allegedly, and I want to note that they are entitled to due process, they allegedly attempted to purposefully keep that from the Office of the State's Attorney, to keep it from the judicial system, to keep it from the due process of those defendants. Ms. Dykes just talked about being the greatest country in the world. I couldn't help but note that when we all stood up and took the pledge, we talked about liberty and justice for all, and that's exactly why we're asking for the resources we're talking about. Ms. Dykes noted the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy. We have 223 motions that were disclosed pursuant to just the property. Those are only in the active cases that are currently out of the Salisbury City Police Department. That's a 4-month, essentially, snapshot in time from right now. It does nothing to the 1997 onward clock. That number can only multiply by the exponential of 4 back to 1997. It's an enormous number. But that's not the one that scares us. The one that scares us is the one we just talked about, which is if there were 3 officers who did do the things that are alleged to have done, we were required to disclose them. And the reason we were required to disclose them is because in our system, people are entitled to due process. And when someone testifies as a witness against you, you get to impeach them on their veracity if you have known instances for their untruthfulness. I'm going to give you an example just because it should kind of bring this, a small, quick example. In an instance where, let's say, one of the 3 police officers that we're talking about right now effectuated a traffic stop on any person in this room, and that traffic stop was based on whatever that officer said that the traffic stop was based on. Well, let's say they find drugs in the car. Sure, that person is guilty of having committed drugs, but if they had no legal right to stop the car, then that person was entitled to due process, and that person was entitled to impeach the veracity of that officer with prior misconduct. For the last 10 years in this county, potentially, there have been 3 officers who have escaped that type of microscope when it comes to their veracity. The rules of evidence, the rules of this state and the rules of this country, when we're talking about due process and also the procedural guidelines of the Maryland statutes, allow and afford everybody equal protection under the law. And for that reason, we have 633 motions right now that are subject to those disclosure. 633 defense attorneys are going to file motions, likely file motions, that are going to try or attempt to reopen those cases. Mr. Taylor, speaking to some of your issues,
the vehicles for which, while I'm not a defense attorney, if I had to guess, they're going to be motions for new trial, which can be filed at any time in the interest of justice, which I think certainly under either Brady, Youngblood, or Kyle's or any of the other due process Supreme Court cases, this would follow. But in addition to that, you do have post-conviction rights. You have quorum nobis rights. There are a whole host of vehicles. There is a cornucopia of which defense attorneys can choose to assail these convictions. We have made this request understanding that we're only asking for 2 prosecutors. And I say only, and I understand that this is a big request, and we don't do that lightly because I think it's fair to say that both Ms. Dykes and I are fiscal stewards of the limited county resources of which we're given. But with only 2 prosecutors, we believe that we can do what seems like an insurmountable task. Because right now, impressively, we have 15 prosecutors who are handling 852 major circuit court cases. We're talking about the worst of the worst. We're talking about your murders, your rapes, your burglaries, your robberies, your gun violence, your gang violence. 15 prosecutors are handling right now 852, to say nothing of your district court prosecutors who do 30,000 cases a year. With 2 more prosecutors, we can take on the additional load that will be the last 10 years and the last 20 years if we're dealing with the property room issue. For us, this was a perfect storm of the property room coming together with the veracity issues, and I think it is I know it to be a reasonable request, but understanding that we are constitutional officers, and regardless of what this body does, we're going to show up to work tomorrow and we're going to do our jobs, and we're going to continue to hold people accountable, but we're going to do it while maintaining justice for all, which is what I believe we are required to do.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I guess a question I might have is, because of the fact that we're looking at 2 prosecutors and an investigator, correct?
Yes.
And we know that it's probably the total is going to be about 300,000 plus. It's going to be as far as what this could cost the county. I'm not really familiar with how the process works legally, so I'm wondering if can attorneys or public defenders, can they challenge their cases if the state or whomever hasn't yet convicted the 3 police officers or the individual in charge of the equipment room? Wouldn't they have to be found guilty of a crime first for them to prove that it's compromised someone's case? If they didn't do anything, the case couldn't have been compromised.
Well, so the answer is no. They can challenge those convictions based upon the information contained within the memo. On its face. They would have to probably call the author of that memo.
Of which memo?
Of the memo that was disclosed by a prosecutor of mine on the 11th. So it is, they could absolutely, there is no requirement for a conviction or like an internal investigation. Those things might be happening. I expect those things are happening now, but there is no requirement for a finding of sustained or a finding at all in an internal investigation, and no finding in a criminal case required.
But again, I mean, if there's no validity, let's say hypothetically there's no validity to the memo or what may have been discussed in the memo. Where are we?
Yeah. So
I don't understand.
Yeah, and listen.
No, it's a fair I mean, these are fair questions.
Yeah.
So the rule, specifically what we're talking about, there are 2 controlling authorities for what govern our actions. You have the due process authorities of the 14th Amendment. Those come through us through the seminal case of Maryland v. Brady. But then there's also procedural guidelines under 4263, which is a Maryland statute. The Maryland statute says that we are required, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm going to get it pretty close, all exculpatory information, whether or not admissible, that tends to impeach a state's witness for veracity. Actually, it says for untruthfulness. What we know, and you have to understand that it's a caveat of tend. So it doesn't require that we know beyond all reasonable doubt. It doesn't require that we know by preponderance of the evidence. If we are made aware of information that tends to impeach a person's veracity, we are required by state statute, the rules governing ethical professionalism, and also due process Supreme Court law to disclose that information. Now, Whether or not someone's successful with that is another story, because if you were a defense attorney and we were, say, in a motions hearing, you would say, but isn't it true that, Councilmember Hastings, you said something that was untrue? Councilmember Hastings can refute that, evidence can be used to refute that, but the opportunity to simply impeach that person is afforded to the person to confront the person who is their accuser.
If the memo involves an individual in your office, is that correct?
So that individual is on leave
Okay.
as we speak.
So I guess my next question would be, is it a conflict of interest for you to investigate any of this because of the fact that you already have someone in your office? Because I'm trying to get
So-
you guys off the hook.
Right. So we are not investigating. I mean, from the outset of this, we called the Office of the State Prosecutor. We consulted with the Attorney General. We then, in pretty short order, went to the Department of Justice. So we are not investigating anything.
I used the wrong term, I'm sorry. I didn't mean investigate. Would you be able to be involved in any of these cases? It appears to me it would be an automatic conflict of interest, and there'd have to be a third party to take on this task.
No, that's not. The cases, the impeachment information goes to the witnesses, right? So it goes to the witnesses that maybe a prosecutor gets called as a witness at trial, who is no longer on active employment with my office.
Right.
That does not create a conflict for us.
Councilman Holloway?
Well, you've been here tonight and seen what happened in the previous actions we took. If we approve these, at some point in time, we got to approve funding. We can't do that. As a rule, Mr. McDermott mentioned the rules. We would be breaking our rules and our charter if we approved the extra funding for this office.
I have not done the math myself, but I believe Mr. McDermott has. We have some salary savings available that would get us through until budget, I believe.
So Mr. Young and I worked together, because he anticipated that being a problem. So so in anticipation of that, we worked with the county finance department, and we were able to identify approximately, I believe it was $46,000 or $49,000 in our current savings within our own budget, and that's just from savings from people who have left, and we didn't fill those positions right away. And so he has calculated a date start time for which that would get us through if it were before the next budget season.
Well, along those same lines, with that said, then why don't we just make this part of this budget season? So we're gonna be doing the budget here in the next couple months, and why don't we just make this part of
That's what we're doing. This is just to approve that.
Well, this is for emergency legislation.
So this is just adding the employees. This
positions.
isn't for pay.
No, what Bill's saying, is this
But no.
emergency legislation is going to go into effect really soon.
They'll go in immediately.
So I'm just saying, why don't we just make this part, propose this as part of your request in the regular operating budget that's going to be presented to us in the next, is it 45 days we get it? I mean, the exact date, but you'll hear soon.
Could I address that, Mr. Don? They're actually two separate items. I mean, it's getting through the rest of this fiscal year, and they have money apparently in the kitty, as they're saying, that would cover that. So this particular bill, as it's drafted, does not appropriate any money for
This
this
is just
year's
to approve the
budget.
positions.
That's what I was just saying.
It just
yeah.
approves the positions. Now, in next year's budget, to address this finance director aspect of it, I don't think that will be an impediment, because we don't need the finance director to authorize next year's budget. That's done separately by the executive. So there shouldn't be a problem regarding the finance director in terms of what we're
For these
talking about now.
three positions. Councilman
So,
Hastings?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the questions have been asked
Yeah,
yet. Go ahead.
so, Councilman McCain, there is a strategic plan to deal with the property room that has been drafted by the Maryland State Police. The Maryland State Police, Lieutenant Colonel Brady, has recommended that I have an investigator, that the state's attorney's office have an investigator assigned full-time to that, that's one of the main reasons for the request. So that, with 402 pieces of property contained in that room, that's going to be a long stretch.
82,000.
Yes, I'm sorry if I missed, thank
Just
you.
for the recording.
No. So would like the opportunity to go ahead and hire that person to get started on that issue. So that is more of an emergent need. It is going to take us a little bit of time to find the right attorneys to fill these spots. They have to be experienced attorneys, and they're not easy to find and recruit to Wicomico County. There are lots of attorneys we know with incredible experience, but they're across the bay. So at least if the positions are allocated, we can start recruiting, hopefully, and start engaging in conversations to get some good people down.
Councilman Hastings? Yeah.
Thinking about of course, this is going to cost the Wicomico taxpayers, was it $100,000 per person, right, per position? Plus
Yes,
an annual salary, plus benefits. I guess how much this was, of course, not, the wrong that happened didn't start with Wicomico County, but it's Wicomico County that's footing the bill. I'm assuming the city of Salisbury, that their police department is the one that actually created this issue. First of all, have we fully explored all local government insurance trusts, is there any kind of issues there where we could get payment out? I'm sure that it seems like it's a very unprecedented issue.
It's my understanding that the county executive has made a proposal.
Jamie.
It's my understanding that the county council has
The executive?
yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. So has plans to make that request. Is that fair?
Yeah, they have a letter that's drafted. I think the first step is meeting with them and kind of figuring out what that looks like. But I think they share, I know they share your opinion as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess then the next step of that obviously is then how do we find more clarity? How much is the city kicking into? Are they helping
And in fairness,
remedy this situation for the taxpayers?
that would, not to pass it,
Sure.
our request has to go through
Yes.
you. If you're asking, I think it's factually accurate for us to say that all problems started in the Salisbury City Police Department. And so make of that what you will when assessing liability.
Councilman Holloway?
Well, Josh, just you reading my notes there, dude? I know John mentioned this before. I was wondering if it would be worth your time and effort to make a plea to the city of Salisbury to help fund this not necessarily this prosecution, but at least the investigator that's going to have to be hired.
I mean, if that's the council's suggestion,
I would make that suggestion.
So it's, we are separate and distinct for reasons.
Right,
You
I
know,
understand that.
for really good reasons. And while this situation is unprecedented, I think that would be too, but we're happy to consider and be helpful in any way that we can.
We don't know where this is going. You're talking $300,000 a year now, plus, so far, this is just the first year of this. So it could get worse. You could get into it and find out it's not as bad as you think it is. But I think the city council, I'm sure they realize and recognize, and the mayor realizes and recognizes this is on their table, and this was so.
We've had conversations, when we've spoken with the chief and with Mayor Day. So I'm happy to engage in those conversations.
Yeah.
Can you briefly explain how something that started in the city falls back to the county, why we're involved?
Because the county.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
I asked her the question.
So the prosecuting authority constitutionally is the office of the state's attorney for each jurisdiction. So in Wicomico County, we have 8 or 9 different law enforcement agencies that we serve. So we're responsible for prosecuting all cases, but they can come from 9 different agencies. Until and unless the city and the county create a county-wide law enforcement agency, That's the only answer.
That question has been asked numerous times in the last 2 weeks, why the
Okay.
county's responsible for something
Did I
that
answer
happens.
it appropriate?
Basically,
adequately?
yeah, and I
Okay.
think Councilman Davis was trying to answer it. So,
Okay.
thank you
I
for
think
that.
we're getting outside of what we're here for. This resolution is to approve the members, and we're going into, trying to get into the case of this, of what's going on.
What
I
they
think if
were
we go ahead
explaining,
and
the-
approve
the
the
entire
resolution,
meeting.
so we can move on, because we're going into stuff that we really don't need to be in. This here is for, to approve the two, counsel and the investigator.
Mr. McCain?
Yeah, and pertaining to the legislation, just a concern I got about the language. This isn't necessarily even a question for you all, but in the language, there's nothing in this resolution that provides any kind of, it kind of gets back to Joe's point, there's nothing about any kind of review, the timing of this, because, you all got your hands full, and the expectation is this will probably get worse before it'll get better. As Joe said,
Those
maybe.
were my words exactly.
Right. Or we keep our fingers crossed,
Right.
maybe it won't be as bad. But regardless of that, this is a temporary problem that might go on, for a long time. But it's still, the request is to meet this temporary emergency that we're faced with. The legislation is a permanent addition of these three positions. There's nothing in this that requires, like, for example, you ought to come back to us in 12 months to update us.
We did
or
discuss that at the last meeting, but I agree it should be in the resolution
What last meeting
to
did we
limit
discuss this
it.
in?
at the last meeting 2 weeks ago.
I would,
That was, well, we won't go there.
Can I just take a moment to address that concern? Because I think, Councilman, it's a great point. But here's the caveat to that point, which is, and I think we would be happy to agree to participate in review processes. I think it's an obligation of every county agency to kind of talk about where your resources are going and to advise certainly the people who are giving the resources. The limitation that we are concerned with because there were original discussions about, do we do this contractually for, say, a year or 2 years or whatever the case may be. The issue with that is what we're looking for right now are top-tier prosecutors. And the reason we need top-tier prosecutors is because when we talk abstractly about one of those 633 cases coming back, those prosecutors who we're talking about hiring need to be able to prosecute the gamut of every crime in the circuit court, essentially. They need to be able to take a murder on a retrial that's from 2012 or take a robbery that happened in 2013. And it does take different skill sets in order to be those different types of prosecutors. And so we're looking for the best of the best. And to do that, we have to recruit from across the bridge. And to do that, we can't tell people that they're only going to have a job for a year, because we're just not going to get those people attracted to this position if they're worried in a year from now they won't be employed.
Well, that just seems like making a great argument for this to be in the current or the next operating budget that we're getting ready to embark on.
To that point, here's what I'll say to that. We don't disagree. We think that this needs, for all the reasons, yeah, you're right. Like, we agree with you. But also to the extent that we are right now, I mean, this isn't hypothetical anymore. We are fielding motions on a daily basis, and they're getting, I'll call them louder. They're demanding things like they want us to pay for their time, the defense attorneys, which is an outrageous request, and that won't fly. But the requests and the motions are getting more voluminous, and they're getting a lot louder. And so we're already devoting resources, and that's why we brought up the numbers, right? We have 852 cases. I actually have the lowest amount of cases of any of the prosecutors. But if you were to just look at the cover sheet that's in front of me, I've devoted all of my time to this issue, and the 4 or 5 murders, attempted murders, first-degree assaults that are on here are taking a second chair to dealing with this issue, which is why we need those people as soon as we can get them.
Councilman Holloway.
We were talking about the funding issue. I have a question, hypothetical question here. If this council was to approve the funding, and as this time you say you've got some funding available, but if this council were to approve the funding in violation of the charter, which it would be, being we don't have a finance director, and the monies that we approved went to hire one of these prosecutors, and they went to court, would one of the arguments from the defense be that this prosecutor was being paid for by unapproved funds?
I don't think so. Do you have a better?
I would probably confidently.
But it's.
It's a good question. I think I can
It's
confidently say
interesting.
no, but also we don't want you to do that because of
No,
the
I understand that.
the savings. I think is the answer.
Right.
We'll, with our savings that we have, as Mr. Taylor said in our kitty, we'll appropriate a start date respective to the money that we already have, and then allocate in the new budget.
But we don't know exactly, you know how much you got in your kitty, but we don't know how much exactly going to cost so far. So my theory is here that defense attorneys will look for any excuse they can.
No, I can't argue with that, but I've never seen or heard of a motion that way. I'd be happy to research it,
No,
but
you don't have to do that. It was
it's,
a hypothetical question there.
yeah,
That was-
Ms.
Okay.
Hurley,
Thank you.
where do we go from here?
The next up is a public hearing, and we can have that on April the 7th at 6 PM.
April 7th at 6 PM.
We vote first.
We already voted.
We voted, didn't we? We haven't voted for the motion. We voted to bring it to the table. We voted to bring it to the table. We have to take a vote as well. We're going to do this.
What was that?
We have to have a vote as whether or not we're going to introduce this.
We voted to introduce it, and that's all we're doing this evening, is introducing it.
What we voted on before was to bring it to the table to discuss it. You entertain a motion in a second, all those in favor, fine. Okay, it comes to the table, you discuss it, that's what we've done. Now we need a vote to formally introduce it.
I thought we had done that, actually.
It was confusing.
Maybe I missed it.
It was confusing.
Yeah, I think we've done that.
Done.
We voted. We can do another vote if
We can have another vote. Need a motion.
So moved.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I'm not sure what I just voted for, but
Thank you. April 7th, thank you.
we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Having trouble getting through all this.
Next on the agenda, we have public comments. When you come to the podium, please state your name, your address, and try to limit it to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, council. My name is Darren Lombardo. I am a Wicomico County resident. I am also an IT professional in system and data analysis for 30 years. I come to you this evening to share some information with you, which is being passed around here. About 10 years ago, I noticed on my son's report cards that there were some oddball things going on, some things that could not be explained. And I monitored those things over the course of some years. And it came to a point where there were so many discrepancies that as I started talking to other parents, they were noticing the same issues. And so we pretty much got together with a bunch of parents and did an independent audit of the Wicomico County Public School System's grades on a county level with an undisclosed amount of students. The results were pretty disturbing. I can tell you that the issues, we have many issues. It's absolutely horrific. Everybody that we've worked with, the parents are pretty upset from the discrepancies we found, which we take a lot of patience showing them how we derive that answer. I tell parents, relax, don't get excited, don't worry about getting this grade changed right now, because we want to leave them intact so you can see. So I can tell you that the result of this is devastating. Now, everyone sitting here to my right, they're either a grandparent, they're a parent, or have kids, or there are kids here that are in the school system. And I could say with 100% assurance that if any of those people come to me right now, I will find grading issues under all of them. And it's very, very disturbing to know that. So the journey has been incredible. The opposition against me to try to deflect, suppress, kick to the side, even going up to the state level, there's been opposition, and it's been pretty disturbing because there's an issue of integrity, and when you're dealing with numbers, the numbers don't lie. Many people could try to make excuses, do all sorts of things, but the numbers don't lie in the end. And we're just talking about simple surface things here. I can't even imagine what's going on behind the scenes. These are just red flags that you see, and there's a big problem. And so one might wonder, how many kids were not able to attend prom because of their grades? How many were kicked off the football team because of their grades? How many did not get into the college they applied for because of their grades? The list goes on. How many kids are grounded by their parents for their grades? The list goes on. So I encourage you to read through this summarized report, which I've put together. I try to do my best to consolidate that so it would not be overwhelming to you, because there are stacks and stacks of papers. So as a result of all of this, I would request that on behalf of all of the citizens of Wicomico County that a performance audit of the Wicomico County school system be conducted, including the grades, knowing that 50% of our tax dollars go to the school system. We expect the school system to be good stewards of the money that's given, and I think we can all agree here that education is our top priority. So we want to see each and every dollar used efficiently, effectively, because we're here to raise up that next generation, and that is very, very important. And so we want to make sure that every child gets the grade they earned. We do an incredible disservice to them by giving them a lower grade other than what they've earned. We do a disservice to them if we give them a higher grade other than they've learned. Some parents just say, oh, my kid got an A. As long as they got an A, I don't care. Well, guess what? Some of those kids actually got B's. And there were times where I had to speak up, because it's about integrity, to say, hey, you gave my kid an A and he earned a B. It does him it's a disservice to him to have him graduate and send him out into the world knowing that you get pass goes. The real world is you have to hit the pavement and hit it hard, and you have to earn your way. And to get it for free or to just pass through, have a nice day, that hurts them. And so I just wanted to emphasize that and encourage you to take that into consideration, because this is a very serious matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardo. Do we have any more public comments?
Yes. My name is Randy Morris. I live at 5485 Mount Hermon Church Road, Salisbury, Maryland, 21804. I'm here tonight to request that you formulate and pass a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution for this county. We have a group that's been growing where a lot of people are really concerned with what's been going on. And just like what we saw in Virginia, we're almost seeing the same thing going on here in Maryland, and it's got a lot of concern going on. I've got a few people here. Some of them want to speak, so I'm not going to try to hold up too much time for y'all, but we rely on you all to be able to make this, because I'd really appreciate it if you would, and a lot of other people would. It would really mean a lot to us to know that you all are standing behind us, and we need to feel that. And I really appreciate it if each of y'all would deeply consider that. And if you don't mind, I'd like to show you the people that have come here. And there's some people outside as well. Okay, I'm not going to hold you up anymore because I know y'all want to get home too, and more people want to speak. But thank you.
All right, thank you.
My name is R.S. Mitchell. I'm from Salisbury, Maryland. Actually, my family's been on the Eastern Shore for over 150 years. I'm here with Randy because of Annapolis, obviously. Randy's actually has 1,500 signatures from Wicomico County asking for this. As of right now, every county in Maryland but Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, and Prince George's County is trying to effect a Second Amendment gun sanctuary. How did we get here? Since 1776, we've had the Second Amendment and 4 federal gun laws: the 1934 National Firearms Act, the 1968 Interstate Transport Act, the 1986 Firearms Safety Act, and the 1993 Brady Bill. There was a 5th, the Bill Clinton assault rifle ban, but that went away in 2004 because FBI statistics didn't report it. 4 gun laws in 230 years. What's happened in Annapolis is last year there were 13 gun laws. This year there were 18. 12 of them would make me a felon. I've never had a single problem in my entire life. It's gone too far. Ms. Atterbury did 12 gun laws in the space of 1 year. I'm sure she's a nice lady. But what it affects is 35% of Wicomico County are gun owners. That affects 35% of your constituents. I'm not saying we should have a felon be in possession of a gun. I'm just saying we should have gun laws that don't affect normal citizens. And the people, the delegates from Baltimore City and Baltimore County are affected by that society, not ours. And I hope you really take this seriously. I know I've talked to Mike Lewis, a good friend of mine, and he is in agreement with me if you want to talk to him about it. But any questions for me?
We typically don't engage.
What?
We typically don't engage in conversation during public comments.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any more comments? Can we make sure he can get through there?
It's very short. I'm sure you guys have heard everything as far as, the Constitution and rights and, the right to protect yourself and everything. I want to give you a personal example of the efficiency of law enforcement versus self-defense. And I'm speaking, of course, on behalf of myself. And I know others that have been in the same predicament. My house was burglarized. I live and own the property that I live on in Wicomico County. My house was burglarized. I knew who the primary suspect was. I told the officer who I thought the primary suspect was. The officer fingerprinted my home, got his fingerprints. 5 weeks later, I identified a piece of property that was at a pawn shop, reported that to Wicomico County. He was never arrested. So tell me, in any type of realization, how I'm supposed to trust that they will do anything when they did nothing. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
If you could state your name for the record.
Alan Bailey.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Sarah Kemp. I live on 3339 Residential Drive in Eden, Maryland. As we've already heard tonight, the citizens of Wicomico County are constantly affected by the craziness that goes on across the bridge. And it's continuing to spill over. So as concerned citizens of Wicomico County, a few of us parents are here tonight to speak out against the lack of common sense and morality that has taken place in the Wicomico County Public Library system. The idea that we would host a drag queen story hour for children both shocks and saddens us as parents. Exactly what message are we trying to send to our youngest citizens? These story hours are geared towards preschoolers, toddlers. Story hour, are we encouraging our young sons and daughters to question their own gender? And to what purpose? According to a study recently published by the American Academy of Pediatrics, more than half of transgender male teens who participated in the study reported attempting suicide in their lifetime. Nearly 30% of transgender females, and among non-binary youth, 41.8% of participants stated that they had attempted suicide at some point in their lives. Not thought of suicide, not suicidal thoughts, actually attempted to take their own life. This is a sad and harrowing statistic. These young people have been sold a lie that changing one's biological and God-given gender will somehow fulfill and complete them, make them feel normal, and give them a sense of purpose. Nothing could be further from the truth. This lie is continually perpetuated by a morally corrupt culture and aggressively pushed by the left in an attempt to indoctrinate and confuse our most vulnerable citizens, our children, all in the name of so-called diversity and inclusion. Furthermore, a simple Google search will lead you to case after case of drag queen story hour events where the drag queen in attendance invited to read aloud to children and toddlers turned out, in fact, to be a registered sex offender. So I ask you, is the Wicomico County Public Library willing to properly vet, fingerprint, and background check each and every one of these drag queens? Is our children's safety even a priority to them? Or is this all about indoctrination, normalizing a mental illness, and grooming the next generation of progressives? We are here today to take a stand and say enough is enough. The library director and its board of trustees seem to operate under the assumption that they are autonomous, that they answer to no one and can schedule programming as they please, regardless of whether or not they have public support. They have ignored every call for cancellation of this event, and relocating the event is not a cancellation. They have made it clear that the voice of the citizens of Wicomico County bear no weight in the Wicomico Public Library system. Members of the County Council, we, the concerned citizens and parents of this county, implore you to send the library director and its board of trustees a clear and concise message that as long as the library accepts our public funds and our tax dollars, we do indeed have a say in the type of programming the library schedules and promotes. I'm asking you to be the voice for the constituents in this county who voted you into office. Vote no on any and all funding requested by the Wicomico County Public Library for the 2020 and 2021 fiscal year. Sounds to me like we have better uses for it. It's time for the County Council to take a clear stand and send a message to the public library that the collective voice of our citizens matter. We, parents, will not be silent, and we will not be bullied by the leftist progressive agenda being forced upon our children. The library has created an environment that is unsafe for children, and we will do whatever it takes to fight for the safety of our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Court Dixon. I'm at 6050 Bridal Court in Salisbury, Maryland, and got a little bit of a late notice that this meeting was taking place, and we might have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Second Amendment. The first part of this meeting was very interesting. If we feel like we might not have the funds to hire 2 attorneys to take care of the city police department problems. I don't know what's going to happen if we don't stand up for our rights on the Second Amendment. If we look at law-abiding citizens for weapons that they already have and decide that all of a sudden we're going to have to start prosecuting those people because overnight I became a felon, overnight RS becomes a felon, we're going to have much bigger problems than we ever thought. And we're going to be taking law-abiding gun owners and taking them off the streets when the people who are committing crimes with weapons are not. So those efforts and the legislation that are coming out of Annapolis from people who are uneducated in what a weapon is, what a firearm how it might be defined, how many rounds should go in a gun, and the functions of those guns. And we have guns now that, a little tiny .22, no bigger than my a couple of fingers, is on a list that says you can't own that in Maryland. Yet obviously we have much larger weapons and much more destructive weapons that are okay. So the common sense laws are already on the books. Doing more and not standing, or making more laws is not where we need to be. We need to stand up for the rights of our citizens and not take our cue from Annapolis and the problems that are in Baltimore City. I urge this council to vote for and pass a resolution to make Wicomico County a Second Amendment sanctuary county and not bow down to a group of legislators passing defective and faulty and inappropriate laws on our innocent citizens here on the Eastern Shore. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, council. Good evening, members of the public. My name is David Parker, and I've recently relocated back to the Eastern Shore, my roots that I'm proud of. I wanted to talk about a couple things. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but this meeting has really opened my eyes to some of the things going on around here. One is this nonsense with the Salisbury Police Department and the county councils, the state prosecutor. Why would we spend good money after bad on this process? Why wouldn't we spend that money on independent investigators outside of the state prosecutor's office, outside of the state, outside of the county, to investigate these wrongdoings? It's inappropriate to keep giving money to an agency that's just going to rubber stamp the investigation. It's inappropriate. I've worked in the criminal justice system. I've worked in pretrial and probation services where I used to live in California. And you need independence to oversee these things. One of the other things I want to talk about was the horrific statements that was made by a speaker about the drag queen story hour. Now, folks may not agree with me on this, but just hear me out. I volunteered in a crisis counseling center at University of Maryland and also in California. The number of youth who are dying from suicide because they identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or non-binary, it's ridiculous. We shouldn't be losing these kids. The reason why we're losing these kids is because our parents, our community, our faith is turning our back on them. We need to be a forgiving society. We need to be a Christian society if that's what you believe in. But it's not turning our backs on our young people. It's not demonizing a community just to score political points. You may not agree with Drag Queen Story Hour. Then don't take your kids to it. Libraries are supposed to be about education and learning. And if this is a way to help kids learn through something different, so be it. No one's getting hurt here. And to ring the bell and say that all these people are sex offenders. I know people who have been drag queens and Drag Queen Story Hour across the country. They're not sex offenders. You probably have sex offenders in this room who aren't drag queens. So let's stop the hysterics. Let's stop demonizing a community for our failures as parents, because it's inappropriate. If you don't agree with it, don't take your kids. You don't need to strip money from the public library system to make a point. Just don't take them. That's your right. Ma'am, I have the floor. Anyway, I really appreciate your time. And folks, you don't need to agree with me, but demonizing a community, it's not what I was raised as here in the Eastern Shore. We were about celebrating our neighbors, respecting each other, loving each other. I still go to my old neighborhood in Johnson's Lake and talk to my neighbors. They know I'm gay, and they still love me because I'm still a good person. So let's stop the hysterics and let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more public comments?
I'm speaking as the concerned, Jennifer Gleason, speaking as the concerned parents of the Drag Queen Story Hour. We wouldn't approve, the parents, of the Drag Queen Story Hour, a homosexual story hour, a heterosexual story hour. Over sexualizing children is inappropriate. Period.
Do we have any more public comments?
Sorry, I think you were pointing at me to come talk. Or was it someone behind? I guess I'm talking. My name's Carlos Ayala. I'm a resident of Wicomico County, live on Woodland Road. First, I brought my son here because of the Second Amendment issue, but this was tremendously educational. I really appreciate all of your service. The issues that you were confronting are mind-boggling to me. They're really big issues. But let me tell you about something personal to me. I am a member of the gun culture. I've taken classes with RS. They were great. I've taught my son to shoot. He knows gun safety probably better than most of the people in this room. I trust him 100% with the weapon and to be safe with it. A substantial amount of what he's going to inherit is tied up in firearms. I'm an investor in firearms. You will make me, actually you won't. The state of Maryland or the federal government will make me a felon. And I believe in the Second Amendment. And someday in the future, I'm going to get arrested. And I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never been arrested in my life, but I will be. As our elected officials who have the power to help prevent that from happening, from making good, law-abiding people felons, I would appreciate you supporting the making of Wicomico County a sanctuary city. And thank you for what you guys do. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more public comments? Last call. All right. Council comments. Ms. Hastings.
Yeah. Oh, well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming out. Thank you for your comments. We do take a lot of what you say to heart. And I did want to start it off by saying I think it did make the news that our county executive has, Bob Culver does have cancer. And I just, of course, wanted to say that he's certainly been in my thoughts and prayers, and I know most of the other council members. We wish him the best and a speedy recovery. The other two things I wanted to bring up was the Morris Mill Dam issue. This has been an ongoing project, and looks like it's going to be delayed again. It's been a process that process that has gone on far too long, and for a lot of different reasons. There's really nothing I can say or do as a council person in order to speed it up, but other than say that it's kind of ridiculous how long it's going on and how bad of a process that it has been. But it needs to be taken care of as soon as possible. It's important to that community, and community in my district too. The other thing I'll mention is I did have a lot of folks reached out over the last couple of days about Pinehurst, the school with the green space. It's been an area that a lot of folks have typically, a lot of people that live in the neighborhood have brought their pets and brought their families through for many years. Where recently the gates have been closed to prevent anyone from coming on the space, or to try to prevent that from happening. We did have good conversation with Dr. Hanlon's office and with administration, I'm actually going to go meet with the principal, but I did speak with him today. We are going to find common ground, and in addition to making sure there's enough waste disposal areas, but we did have, actually I will say this is very important, it's one thing to have a lot of constituents call and complain about an issue. It's another to have them call and say, this is an issue, but I want to help. And I was really taken back and actually proud of all the folks that reached out and said that they want to now start to see what they can do as neighbors to pick up dog droppings, which have been tracked into the school and which brought on this whole situation, as well as some of the other the trash that has been that has accumulated, and helping out with landscaping and making it a better space. Ultimately, that's what I think we want out of our residents and our my constituents or any folks, residents. You want a community that actually wants to face, not just be aware of a problem, but then find common ground and fix it. So, thank you to all who have reached out, and we're going to take care of it.
Thank you.
This was a really,
Exactly.
this was a very heavy meeting. I just want to thank everyone who came out to speak, and our state's attorney, Ms. Dykes, for all that she's handling. This is, I'm sure, a very difficult time. The parents that came to speak, to voice their concerns for their children. As a parent of 3, I understand how much that weighs on your heart. So, thank you.
Mr. Cannon?
Sure. I appreciate everybody being here tonight, and I do understand your concerns as far as your gun rights. I also worry a lot about Annapolis as well as to what they do, and I think they overreach quite often. I think they're also doing that in this case as well. We'll have to see how we're going to address this as the council. We'll have to see how the executive is going to look at this. I believe Mike Lewis has discussed it with the executive. So I'm assuming something will be coming to the council in that vein, and we will look at that at our table. But I understand your concerns, and I empathize with what you're saying. In reference to the drag queen reading, this is a tough one for anyone. It's really tough for a politician because you try to balance things sometimes. And I found it a very difficult issue to weigh myself. You know, I think as I would assume most of us in the room, we're very accepting of anyone's personal gender or personal privilege as to whether they want to be a male, a female, a transgender, whatever they might do. I think that most of the people in this room are civil-minded, and if you were to pass that person on the street, you're not going to be disrespectful. You know, you're going to respect them for what their beliefs might be. I do, though, have to say that I have a concern when you are involving very impressionable young children in this process. I understand that the reading is for parents that want to bring their children to the event. So it isn't as if they are imposing themselves on any one of us. Because if you're not in favor of it, you won't take your children there. And that's not going to be a concern to you. What my concern might be is the fact that it is government funding that, in a sense, is advocating this. And I have a question about that. I'm not saying I take a position for or against it, but I do have a concern about it. I'm just trying to be very honest. I did have a discussion with the director of the library. And in that discussion with her, you know, part of my questioning was, what if there, as opposed to a drag queen organization, what if there was a lingerie organization? Let's say a group of 10 women that formed a lingerie organization. They wanted to go to the public library and they wanted to read stories to children in lingerie. That might be offensive to anyone. It's politically correct as far as their sexual preference, but is it morally correct to allow that exposure to a younger child if it's a government-funded organization? I would say if the KKK were to come into Wicomico County and say, we want to have a story time with young children, I mean, I think that would raise your eyebrow and you would say, that may not just feel right. I am in no way comparing drag queens to the lingerie girls, or I'm not comparing them to the KKK. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what came across my mind when I tried to evaluate just how fair we want to be, how fair we should be when government funding is involved. And I have a concern. You know, it could be inappropriate that we're imposing someone else's belief on very impressionable young children. So that's where I just wanted to clear that as far as, you know, my perception on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank everybody for being here tonight. John well said. I'm not going to dive too deep into that. And thank you, Mrs. Kemp, for your email. Appreciate it. Appreciate you coming tonight. I really do. But you spelled it out pretty good, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
A couple other things. I held a town hall meeting a couple weeks ago at Mount Hermon Church concerning the closing of Walston Switch Road, and had about 30 people plus some media. And Laura, thank you for coming. Larry, Ernie, thanks for coming. There was pretty much a lot of concern. A lot of people didn't know exactly what was going to happen with Walston Switch Road. So Weston Young from the executive's office came, and he laid it out pretty well. There was some mixed feelings about some people didn't want it closed at all. Some people were okay with it being closed. But the big concern came up is there was never any studies done as far as the effect it was going to have on Airport Road and Mount Hermon Road. Kind of was under the impression that maybe that would get done before the road was closed, but it wasn't. There was also supposed to be a cul-de-sac and talk of a gate for emergency vehicles to get through, easier than traversing Mount Hermon and Airport Road. That wasn't done either. So I'm a little disappointed in the actions that were taken by the executive's office to get this done. They would say in a more timely manner. So I don't think they put the citizens first in that process. Hopefully things will work out, and I hope there's no incidents that cause any problems. The charter, you've seen, everybody in the room seen what happened tonight as far as us not approving transfers. We take an oath when we get elected, to follow the law. And I know that the county is in dire straits over what's happening, but it's been almost 2 years now since this has been evolving. And I can't sit up here myself and vote against the charter and what we're responsible for. And I'm not criticizing my other council members. Everybody has their own thoughts on this. But that's what I got elected by the citizens in my district, to uphold the charter and uphold the laws of Wicomico County. And when there's a blatant disrespect for what this council has passed in the past, what we have voted on in the past, and just about every council member here voted not to reconfirm our finance director. So we don't have a finance director. We don't have a deputy finance director. Our finance department, thank goodness, is staffed by capable people that are doing a good job as far as the employees down there go. But the county has to get some kind of way. It's got to get in shape here. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, we got situations sitting out here. Mrs. Dykes has got problems with what's coming up. Talking about the courthouse tonight. We've had issues with the rec and parks that we didn't approve. So I'm sending a message out to the county executive's office to get their ducks in a row, and so we can move on. This county needs to work, and it's worked for so long. It's just disgusting on my part to see what's going on. So I'm ranting a little bit now. I think that's all I have for tonight, other than the Second Amendment issue out here. I'm from Parsonsburg. The three things I grew up knowing is you don't mess with my girl, you don't mess with my gun, you don't mess with my car. And
in what order, Joe?
Pardon me?
In what order? Either one. She's watching.
Yeah. Anyway, and I understand, I've talked to people that lived on the other side of the bay that's been victims of the crime situation. I can understand those feelings that those people have over there. We're lucky. We're lucky we live in Wicomico County. We don't have the problems that you see on the other side of the bay. We don't have the traffic. We don't have the crime, you know. And I can understand where they're coming from, but the old saying is, you know, take away our guns, the only people who's going to have guns are going to be the criminals, and that's you know, that's not right. So, thanks again. I talked too much tonight.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to just keep it real short tonight. Believe it or not, this is supposed to be the short part of the meeting, and we got 5 more work sessions to go yet. So, but actually, Mr. Hastings mentioned our county executive's health situation, and he needs that power of prayer. So I certainly ask everyone to have him in their thoughts and prayers. That's all I have.
Mr. Davis. All right. I too want to convey my prayers to County Executive Bob Culver. I've talked to him. He called me when he released the news. I think we kind of already knew it, and a lot of us have been praying since then, so no one deserves to go through that. A lot of family members are going through cancer, so please keep them in your prayers. So, and as far as everybody that's here tonight, I thank everybody for coming here tonight. I saw a lot of passion. I saw a lot of compassion. The state's attorney's office, the people at the podium. You all had issues, and I've been listening to it for several weeks now, the Second Amendment, the gun laws. I've been a gun owner all my life. My dad's from West Virginia. They all have guns there. So my kids have guns. I've taught them how to shoot. They're very respectable. They know how to safely handle a gun. And it's our God-given right. So I appreciate everybody that supports our gun rights. So thank you for coming up to speak on the Second Amendment. The issues in the school, there is going to be an audit. You and I talked about that. The state always does an audit, and I appreciate your concern over that. A lot of people don't know about things that are going on in the schools or in the county unless somebody comes up and speaks on it. So I appreciate that. And I've heard other people talk about that as well. But we do have a lot of good people in our schools. We have a lot of good teachers, have a lot of good administrators. And I would like to congratulate all the Teachers of the Year that were voted for each school. And we've got the Teacher of the Year banquet coming up at the end of the month. So they do good things, and they do need to be recognized. So I thank all of our good people in the school system and all of our county employees and people that do hard work for you all. So thank you all. And I think every one of us has talked to most of you people out there. That's what we're here for, so thank you. Appreciate everything you all do, so thank you. All right, moving on. All right, need a motion to adjourn from legislative session to go into open work sessions, followed by a closed work session pursuant to the general provisions article, section 3-305B7, to consult with legal counsel to protect the attorney-client privilege, and an administrative closed session pursuant to the general provision article, section 3-104, for an internal auditor project update. So, thank you, everyone.
Need a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
You need your motions.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. First on the work session, we have the proposed community cat regulations. Ms. Susan Coleman.
Take a 3-minute recess.
Want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah. Let's take
While
5.
everybody's leaving and moving around, we're going to take a 5-minute break.